Hey folks, Mark Yerkes here, and behind me is one of the iconic structures of the old Roman Empire, the Colosseum. Not only a symbol of Rome's power, but also its cruelty. And yet, it is also a symbol of the Christian faith. So join us as we do a little exploration of its obscure Christian history.
Rome, Italy is known for its magnificent churches, Renaissance artworks and fountains, monuments and delicious cuisine. But certainly when we think of Rome, we remember the ruins of the ancient empire, and the greatest of them all, the Colosseum, the symbol of Rome's brutality and power. Gladiators fighting wild animals and each other, sometimes until death. The gladiators always stood a chance of survival. Some became heroes. Some who were slaves won their freedom. But there was another category of participants at these so-called games who stood no chance of surviving. The Roman amphitheaters were also a location for executions, as the opening acts for the battles to be fought later in the day. Counted among those who suffered death in the arenas were unknown numbers of Christian men, women, and children martyred for their faith. We have heard about those fed to the lions. But others were killed in even more hideous ways. In this episode, we will pay a visit to the Colosseum, give you a brief overview, and discuss how to enter, but our focus will be upon the Christians who endured persecution to the end. Let's start with some historic background. It was during the reign of Emperor Nero that the persecution of Christians began. Nero wanted to build himself a huge palace in the center of Rome, south of the Forum, where most of the temples and administration buildings were located. But the area was already filled with houses and other buildings. On July 19 of the year 64, a fire broke out in the area that burned for several days and totally consumed entire districts. Some have speculated that Nero might have ordered the fire to be lit so that he could build his golden palace. There is no hard evidence supporting this conjecture. Nevertheless, the fire was convenient for him. The people of Rome were obviously upset. A scapegoat was needed, and Nero put the blame on Christians. Tradition holds that both the apostles Peter and Paul were executed by Nero that same year. Nero's golden palace was nearly completed 4 years later. But he didn't live to enjoy it. He was driven out of Rome, and having no supporters, he committed suicide. Over the next 40 years, the structures were abandoned or torn down for the materials. Emperor Vespasian ordered the construction of the Flavian Amphitheater, as it was called, in its current location around the year 70 AD, and it was completed 10 years later. Outside the amphitheater was the colossal golden statue that Nero had built to himself, and thus the amphitheater gained the popular name, the Roman Colosseum. Today, as in ancient times, the Colosseum is the centerpiece of Rome. There are options for public transportation, but the best means of reaching it is by metro, taking Line B to the Colosseo station. There are also several buses that come to the Colosseum, but while we were visiting in the fall of 2024, accessing the location was difficult. A vast renovation project is taking place throughout Rome. You will find fencing and construction that diverts traffic at many of the most popular archaeological and religious sites in preparation for the 2025 Jubilee. Until these renovations are complete, Rome can be a difficult city to navigate. so do your planning in advance. You may also wish to purchase your entrance tickets online in advance of your trip. You should start your research by accessing romapass.it or the official Colosseum website to consider your many options, including guided tours, access to the Colosseum's arena floor, and the underground hypogeum. There are still places in Rome where you can buy your tickets upon arrival. Keep in mind that an advance reservation time is required in order to visit the Colosseum. The standard combo ticket allowing access to the Colosseum, the Palatine Hill, and the Roman Forum costs €16 as of this posting, and can be acquired at ticketing kiosks near the sites. But to avoid standing in long lines, you may find it better to visit one of the official tourist information offices. To enter the Colosseum, you should start by finding the proper gateway. There are different entrances depending upon your ticket access or whether you are on a guided tour. Signs are posted, but usually the longest line is for general admission. You will have to pass through 3 security screenings before you reach the Colosseum interior, checking your possessions, tickets, and reserved entrance time. The arch that leads you to the arena gives the first indication that you have entered a site of Christian significance. A large cross was erected in 2003 to honor the martyrs who died for their faith, and many visitors stop to have their pictures taken beneath it. Only a special ticket will grant you access to the arena floor, but this first level above the hypogeum makes a great photo shot, as my lovely wife Tess can affirm.
Hey, I'm not gonna lie, guys, this place is crowded.
The hypogeum was the innovation that made the Colosseum unlike any other arena in the world. In 83 AD, Emperor Domitian ordered a master engineer named Tigris to construct an underground complex about 30 feet deep, from which gladiators and animals could be hoisted up to appear suddenly through the arena floor. It required a host of innovative machines to accomplish a spectacle never before seen. The underground was a horrifying, noisy, hellish environment dedicated to the entertainment of death, and it would have been within cells of the hypogeum that prisoners, including Christians, whose offense was nothing more than loyalty to the King of Kings rather than the Roman Emperor, were held until the moments before their martyrdom.
Well, we made it to the arena. This is the place where so many Christians were persecuted. Some of them were executed outright. Others faced serious animals like bears and leopards and lions and the like. And frankly, the animals mostly won. But that is only in the physical sense. In the spiritual sense, the guys who persisted in the faith, they were the winners.
Imagine the perverse excitement of the crowds as leopards or lions appeared from below to devour God's redeemed children. If the emperors thought that this would squash the spread of Christianity, they were mistaken. The courage and confidence with which Christians died were a testimony to everyone, and many came to embrace the faith as a result.
Well, it's rather warm, but we made it up here to the second level of the Colosseum. And wow, to think that this is a place where so many Christians were persecuted and died, it just makes you think.
Historians do not all agree that Christians were killed in the Colosseum, but it requires a certain level of willful denial to reject the obvious. We know that Christians suffered martyrdom in public arenas throughout the Roman Empire. The Colosseum was no exception. It was in operation for more than 5 centuries in total, through some of the most intense periods of persecution before Constantine legalized Christianity in the early 4th century. We know that prisoners, especially political prisoners, were executed in the Colosseum, and Christians were considered political enemies because their beliefs rejected the emperor's supreme authority. Whether modern historians agree or not, the Roman Catholic Church certainly does view the Colosseum as a holy site consecrated by the blood of the martyrs. The memorial relief located on the outer southeast wall of the Colosseum mentions 3 of the popes closely identified with its renovation and consecration, and the recognition continues to this day. Every year on Good Friday, an evening torchlight procession of the Stations of the Cross is led by the Bishop of Rome around the Colosseum to remember the Passion of Christ and those who stood up for their faith to their last breath. A fitting remembrance and encouragement for all Christians to endure to the end. Thank you for joining us at the Roman Colosseum. Until our next episode of Obscure Christian History, may God bless.